Alright guys, so today on top today's episode we're gonna put together the short block. So that means, well, let's define it. By definition, a short block is the actual engine block itself plus the rotating assembly, and technically all the way up to the point of having cam, lifters. You can have all the other parts assembled, but it's not a long block until you put cylinder heads on the actual motor itself. So today we're finishing up the short block, at least what I'm calling it. I'm not putting on the oil pump or the timing chain or the camshaft yet, mainly because I don't have those parts yet, but this is what I would consider a short block. The entire point of this is to just show you guys sort of the basic tools and ideas of what you need to actually get this done. So, you know, gapping pistons, or no, gapping rings, not the pistons. If you gap pistons, you got problems. Gap the rings, set them on the piston itself, and put them in the block. Seems pretty simple, but depending on your application, your gap will be different. So I'm gonna boost this engine eventually, so that changes my gap of the piston ring itself. In the book, the stock piston ring gap on an LM7 starts as low as like 0.001, so 10 thousandths, all the way up to 20 thousandths. 20 thousandths being the max acceptable spec in the book. Realistically, people have opened these blocks up, and from the factory, they've gotten them as tight as 9 thousandths all the way up to 30 thousandths, especially once they've had a few miles put on them. So they'll run regardless. It's just the efficiency of your setup and the safety of it will depend on your application. So when you boost something or you put turbo on something, nitrous, you put it under any extra stress, you're basically getting the piston hotter by introducing more heat in the way of more power. By adding more air, you're throwing in more fuel, making a bigger explosion, making more power. So the odds of your ring being a thin piece of metal, the chances of it expanding more and more and touching and effectively breaking the piston ring land, which is how you break pistons as well, is higher when you do those things. So you make the gap of the piston ring itself wider. How much more than factory spec? It really depends on how much more power you plan on adding and what type of parts you have. So I just hopped on Sloppy Mechanics, the Matt Happel website, and I looked at a few different specs that people had for the type of boost numbers they're running, along with asking a few engine building friends. Like I asked Robert from Klein Engines, and I asked Robbie on his. I couldn't exactly remember what I did to the Maverick when I first put it together because I didn't record that. I think on the Maverick I ran 26 and 24, which is technically the opposite of what you want. I think that ideally it would have been 26-24 is how I should have done it. Nonetheless, it's running just fine, and I'm gonna put more power out of it eventually. That's actually for next video, and we'll find out how well I built that motor once it's under boost. But for the time being, this engine with a 4-inch bore, Total Seal and a few other companies have a little ring gap sort of chart. And they tell you, oh, 0.0075 thousandths per inch of bore, or 0.006 per inch of bore. So in this case, I looked on Total Seal's website, and they said for the top piston ring, it was like 0.006 or 0.0075 times 4 inches. I ended up with about 28 thousandths or 26 thousandths on the top ring. So that's where I ended up there. And then for the second ring, I went with 28 thousandths. The second ring, you're supposed to make a little bit bigger than the top ring. That's the one you actually want to gap a little more. Or you can gap them square, depending on how you feel about building the motor. I've honestly seen people run 30 to 32 thousandths gap on top and bottom and have minimal blow by. You know, I don't necessarily believe that having just that much more gap will cause a lot of blow by, but If you get excessive, let's say 35,000s, 40,000s, you're gonna have a lot of blow by. You know, that's top fuel numbers. We're talking half of that, if not less, depending on the motor style. Some people recommended 22 on the top ring, 24 on the second ring, which to me seems a little tight, but you know, some people are gonna tune their engines a lot safer than I am. So I'm just giving myself as much margin as I can with trying to be efficient for what I think I can accomplish. All that being said, here are some of the things you want for when you start gapping rings. I'll turn this down. So, first things first, you're gonna want feeler gauges. All these are different thickness gauges that are friction fit into your gap. So this is 25 thousandths right here. All you would do is take this one, put it between the rings when it's in the bore, and if this doesn't slide in easily, it's going to be less than 25 thousandths. If this slides in and you can wiggle it left to right, or it slides in a little bit too easily with no friction at all, it's probably a little bit more loose than you would like. And then you can adjust from there. So that's what that's for, to check your gap. This is how you would adjust your gap. Piston ring filer. This, you just clamp down to your table, put your piston ring on, file it as needed. You can take this handle off and put a drill on it if you really want to, but I've yet to have a reason to do that, so I just keep the handle on. And what I like to do is, if I know that a pack of rings is sort of all within the same area gap wise when I put it in the block, I'll start counting the turns off maybe the first 1 or 2 pistons. And if I keep checking the bores with the piston rings and they end up being the same when I start, and I know I got to gap them further, then I will count the number of turns, and I can usually get within 1 or 2 turns perfectly, so I don't have to overshoot or undershoot or keep checking and gapping and keep filing, I should say, and checking the gap. So this actually can be a time saver if you can math it out right. Or the other thing you can do is you can take your rings, put them in each bore, and then keep swapping bores and see which one is closer to the spec you're trying to get to. But to me, honestly, most ring sets are consistent enough to where I don't think that would really help you, unless you have super loose rings where you're like, oh man, these are all kind of loose, I want to get it as tight as possible. That might be one scenario where it's actually worth playing musical rings. The other thing you'll want is a piston ring depth tool. So this simulates a piston, so when you put your ring in the bore, it's never usually going to be perfectly square in the bore. It's going to be off to one side within the bore. So what this does is it simulates a piston. You put it in, spin it around, and the ring should be then perfectly flat within the bore. Then when you check the gap, it's actually accurate, and it's consistent because it's a consistent depth of about 1 inch or 3/4 of an inch on this tool. So once you have all of that done and your rings are all set, you actually need one more tool that I forgot to grab. Give me 1 second. One of these guys. It's a set of piston ring spreader pliers, and it opens up the gap on the ring so you can put it over the piston. This is very easy to use incorrectly if you overshoot how much you're opening up the ring, because you can break a ring doing this. This is done very conservatively as you're using this tool, but it is a lifesaver, because if you try and spiral on rings, meaning you try and put one corner of the ring into a ringland and turn it around the whole piston and trying to get a drop in, you can actually break the ring that way as well, and also scratch the skirt and the actual side of the piston as you're installing it. Some people say you don't need these at all. Some people say these are a must. I use them. I've done it where I spiraled them on. I would say this is a little bit better of a method, mainly because you're mitigating the amount of chance that you have of actually damaging something. So definitely a good tool to have just in case. Last things are a marker and assembly lube. Get yourself a good quality assembly lube. I like the Royal Purple stuff. I've had this bottle for quite a while. It hasn't done me wrong. It's viscous enough to where I feel like it'll stay when I apply it, and it's also not thick enough to where I'm like, this stuff's gonna end up in the bottom of the pan. So I like this stuff so far. Works pretty nice. You'll want to put that on the piston skirts and on the bearings when you're installing the connecting rods into the block with the piston, so that you can, assemble it all wet. You don't want to put it all together dry unless you're doing plastic gauge, which I'll do later. Marker is to let you know which bolts you have already torqued, and also to number off your pistons once you have gapped the rings to each bore. Once you gap the ring to a bore, that is its home. You do not want to mix the ring between bores. Even if they're all really close, they're all still going to be slightly different. So you definitely either A, write the number on the piston, and as soon as you're done gapping the ring, put it on the piston and keep them in order, or gap your rings, leave them in the bore, and then once you're ready, number all your pistons to the bores and assemble it that way. You can do it either way, whichever one you prefer. That's how I did it, is I left the ring in the bore, numbered the piston, put the ring on the piston, did the next one, and that's all I did. And there is correct orientations to piston rings. I would go over that, but every ring pack is a little different, so mine would be a little moot for this video. I sort of skipped over this guy. This is a piston ring compression tool. This is a fixed size tool. So you can see 4.0 bore. That means that this is rigid. So you just literally slide the piston in, and it's tapered so that all you got to do is just push the piston in. So what I use is just a rubber mallet, and I just use it to tap in the piston. You'll see it in the video. And honestly, this is probably my favorite tool now. If I ever put together another motor, I'm just going to buy the right rigid tool and just be done with it, because the adjustable tool kind of sucks. You got to kind of center it and tighten it all the time and reuse it, and it doesn't really hold it right. This is perfect. This is the best tool so far. So definitely recommend investing in one of those if you're planning to put together an engine. Definitely #1 tool there. So with that being said, let's get to the time lapse. I'm not going to bore you with actually gapping the rings and going through the minutia of putting it in, checking it 3 or 4 times, so this will turn into a 45-minute video. I'm just going to show you guys me installing the pistons into the block, torquing them, checking spacing, and then that'll be it. that's it, guys. I'll catch you guys on the next video. Thank you guys for watching. The block is getting closer and closer to being finished, and hopefully here soon I'll have more updates on the Maverick. Right now you're not seeing it in the garage because it's somewhere else. So like, share, and subscribe. Let me know if I missed anything. Let me know if there's anything you guys do special that I didn't do. And I'll see you guys on the next one.